Sorry, carry on.
Okay, hold on.
Moses conveys the laws governing the annulment of vows to the heads of the tribes of Israel. War is waged against Midian for their role in plotting the moral destruction of Israel, and the Torah gives a detailed account of the war spoils and how they were allocated amongst the people, the warriors, the Levites, and the high priest. The tribes of Reuben and Gad, later joined by half of the tribe of Manasseh, asked for the lands east of the Jordan as their portion in the promised land, these being prime pasture land for their cattle. Moses initially angered by the request, but subsequently agrees on the condition that they first join and lead in Israel's conquest of the lands west of the Jordan.
Okay, one sec. Not working. Oh, here we go. Yeah.
The 42 journeys and encampments of Israel are listed, from the Exodus to their encampment on the plains of Moab across the river from the land of Canaan. The boundaries of the promised land are given, and cities of refuge are designated as havens and places of exile for inadvertent murderers. The daughters of Zelophehad marry within their own tribe of Manasseh, so that the estate which they inherit from their father should not pass to the province of another tribe.
Okay.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
what it says about them the pasture land for their cattle. Does cattle in this context mean any animal, any domestic?
I think livestock generally.
Animals, livestock, because were they not shepherds rather than cattle herders?
Good question. Not sure. It means livestock.
Also in the desert, how did the animals eat? I mean, the people had manna.
Well, I don't know. This comes up from time to time because they always found animals to sacrifice. I mean, food-wise, they were eating manna and quails, but they always seem to have animals to sacrifice. I'm not sure we're told anywhere explicitly how that worked exactly. I don't know if normal livestock could survive in the desert. It's a very good question. I don't know the answer. It does come up from time to time.
Maybe the manna for the humans is the manna for the animals.
Yeah, maybe the animals get manna as well. Yes. It tasted like grass to them.
Possibly. It's a good question. It's one we probably need to find an answer to at some point. In the meantime, it seems they had large herds of livestock, actually. Right. So this.
Well, when they went out of Egypt, they would. Moses insisted that they went out with their flocks and their herds, didn't he?
Yeah.
Not just the people, but they had to take their animals because they didn't know how many animals they would have to sacrifice.
Yeah.
Was his explanation to Pharaoh, wasn't it?
Yeah. So all good stuff. We're not going to talk about the animals today. We're going to talk about ethics and morals. Well, this week's Parsha contains this whole story, which we're going to look at with the 2.5 tribes. And we're going to look at a very key phrase, which we're going to see in a moment, about basically being squeaky clean, quite literally. So let's have a look. When they said that they wanted to have this land on the east of the Jordan for pasture, and they basically wanted to be sort of, they would stay there while everyone else carries on, right? This is the famous line. Who would like to read number 1? Go on, volunteer.
Okay. Moses replied to the Gadites and the Reubenites, "Are your brothers to go to war while you stay here?"
I think we did this maybe last year or the year before. We talked about there was an ad campaign in Israel in the last few years that used this pasuk, this phrase, right, about regarding people going to the army. How can you, your brothers go to war while you stay home?
We're talking about the Shivas.
Was this not in the spirit of the spies who demoralized everybody? Isn't this a good way to demoralize people? So they take it on board. You know what their reply was? I don't remember what their reply was.
We'll go with you, but let us leave our families here and give them protected I can't think of the word, places that they of safety here while we go with our brothers to war and then come back afterwards, or
Right.
words to that effect.
Right. So, yes, they said, no, this is not a scam. We're not trying to get out of it. This is what they said. Here. Who'd like to read number 2?
I'll read it.
Go on.
We will not return to our homes until the Israelites, every one of them, are in possession of their portion.
Right. So Moshe says, I want you to swear that and take an oath. And this is the oath. Who's reading this one?
I'll read it.
Sorry, not the oath. This is what Moshe says back to them.
When the land is then conquered before God, you may then return, free of any obligation before God and Israel, and this land will be yours as a permanent property before God.
Right. The key phrase here, let's see if I can make this work. 1 second. No. Oh, yeah. Free of any obligation. No, I don't know how to do this. Oh, that's a shame. Oh, yeah, here we go. Right. So the key phrase here, I really shouldn't know how to do this kind of stuff. The key phrase here is this, right? Free of any obligation before God and Israel. This is a very crucial phrase. Clean, you have clean hands, both in the eyes of the Almighty and in the eyes of human beings. So let's just talk about that for a moment before we look at some more sources. Situations that could be misconstrued, right? So, for example, you're eating a vegan cheeseburger, right? Which is 100% vegan, but it sure looks like a beef burger with cheese, right? Question. Is there any issue as far as God is concerned?
No,
No. Why not?
See that?
He'll know.
because he knows what
You'll know, right? So what's the issue? The issue is a human one, right? As far as your fellow human beings, basically.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So it's not enough to be, you have to be clean before God, but he knows what's really going on, but also before other people. So one has to be seen. You know, sometimes people say we have to be seen to be doing the right thing, and people poo-poo that, say, oh, you know, it's all about appearances. Appearances are important. Sometimes you have to be seen to do the right thing, as it were. Yes.
That's what's called Maris iron, isn't it?
Yes, correct.
Yes.
Amongst other things. So let's see some practicalities of this. The mission in Shekalim speaks about, now Shekalim, of course, the half shekel, right, was the poll tax, was the collection that was used, was taken in order to fund the various activities in the temple. So the mission in Shekalim tells us about the requirement for those who were going into the chamber to take money from the donations. Let's see what the requirement. Oh, here's the phrase, right? This is it. V'tem nekiyim me'adushem Israel. You have to be clean and innocent in the eyes of both God and mankind. That's very important. Right. Let's read this. Who'd like to read number 5? Any volunteers?
Okay.
Julian.
The person who made the appropriation did not enter the chamber wearing a bordered cloak or shoes or tefillin or an amulet, so that if he subsequently became poor, people would not say that he became poor because he committed an offense in the chamber. And so that if he became rich, people would not say that he did so by misappropriating contributions in the chamber. For we must be free of blame in the eyes of people, just as we must be free of blame before God. As it is said, you shall be innocent in the eyes of God and Israel.
Right. So very important idea. It's interesting. Right. So if he was wealthy, no one assumed it was God's blessings. They assumed he'd stolen some money. And if he was poor, they assumed he also stole some money, and therefore he was punished by God. So therefore he couldn't have any pockets or a money belt or anything that people would say he had the opportunity to spirit away some of the cash. Right. Now, you could say, how can you be so mistrustful of people? You know, you give this person they used to say in New York, people would hire, let's say, I don't know, a nanny during the day, often non-Jewish nannies, and you know, the nanny would be responsible for feeding their children, obviously had to know what kosher food was, but meanwhile, of course, they would lock up their valuables in the safe. So people would say, I don't understand. If you don't trust this person with your valuables, why would you trust them with your children? Now, I'm not sure I totally agree with that, because there is a concept of not putting a stumbling block before someone. So it's not fair to leave valuables lying around that might tempt a person to snaffle them. On the other hand, you can see the thinking there, right? You can see where it's coming from. So we should all be above suspicion, right? You should always have two signatories on a bank account. I think when Moshe was counting the money, didn't it say that he had someone with him as well? Even Moshe Rabbeinu. Even the greatest people need checks and balances. It's very important so that they can be completely free of any kind of suspicion whatsoever. So we don't pull rank. We don't say, well, if you don't trust me, then, I can't do my job. How can I be the head teacher if you don't trust me with the money? How can I be the rabbi if you don't trust me with the money? How can I be the ... if you don't trust me? It's not we don't trust you, it's that we put checks and balances in place. And anyone who has a problem with that, one should worry about. We discussed this in the Tanya share, right? Anyone who says, I'm above suspicion because I'm in a position of such responsibility. No, unfortunately not. Let's see what the Tosefta says on that, which is the additional comments on the Mishnah. Anyone want to read number 6?
I will. When one went in to take up the offering of the chamber, they would search him when he went in and when he came out. And they continue chatting with him from the time he goes in to the time he comes out.
Wow. So like they'd weigh him, like going in and coming out. Why do you think they were chatting to him?
To make sure he wasn't putting anything in his mouth to
Right.
hide it way out.
Right. So he wasn't putting any money in his mouth, right? The modern day equivalent would be to have a metal detector on entry and exit. So, you get this from time to time. You get this with shul security. You get people, I haven't seen it so much here, but I remember years ago, it's usually people that never come to shul that take great umbrage that the security guard doesn't recognize them. Yeah? Oh, don't ask me to open my bag, Wait a second. We ask everyone to do that. It's a standard thing, It's a standard thing. So those that are involved with money, right, they couldn't have anything that might possibly tempt them to steal some of the money. Are we saying everyone's dishonest? No, we're saying people are human and they're open to temptation. Also, others, it's human nature to be suspicious. So one of the qualities, we talk about humility. We haven't said this in relation to Moshe, but one of the qualities of humility would be to say that I recognize I'm no different from anyone else. I have to obey the law just like anyone else. And unfortunately, I can come under suspicion just like anyone else because we're all human. There's no papal infallibility in Judaism. Doesn't matter who you are. So if you're the chief executive of a charity, you absolutely should not just be able to spend money on expenses just because you're the chief executive. Same checks and balances that everyone else has.
It's like people get upset when they're asked on the way out of a supermarket for their receipt or whatever. I mean,
Right.
Nowadays, apparently some supermarkets are asking for receipts. But if you haven't stolen anything, if you've paid for all the goods that you've bought, why would you be upset about it being checked?
Right,
I don't see why
exactly.
you would be upset.
Right, exactly. People say, well, do I look like a terrorist? Do I look like a child molester? Do I look like a thief? Well, most thieves don't actually have bags that say swag and, stripy
No,
jumpers.
exactly.
And unfortunately, most pedophiles don't look like old men in dirty raincoat coats. And a lot of terrorists don't actually look like what people think they look like either. So the reality is that, yes, it's the price of, nowadays we'd say it's the price of safety, but it's more than that, actually. It's the price of having clean hands, of saying, you're welcome to search me because I recognize that way we make sure that there's no risk of any accusation later on. Right? It's like any fence that we build or any barrier that we put up, the laws of Yichud. You're not supposed to be alone with people. It's interesting, just by the way, traditionally Yichud refers to opposite gender. So immediately people say we live in a very society that's not particularly a binary heterosexual society, and there are all kinds of different temptations. And actually, we all know of stories, particularly in the Catholic Church, or in, unfortunately, occasionally the rabbinate, where actually victims were young boys that were molested by men, or less commonly, but sometimes girls by women. So actually, shouldn't we apply these strictures across the board? And the answer is, interestingly, no less of an authority than the Rambam over half a millennium ago actually suggests that Yichud laws should actually apply to same gender as well. That you shouldn't seclude yourself with anyone that there might be a question mark. So that would definitely include a subordinate employee or a student of either gender, actually. People say, oh, these religious people, they can't keep their hands to themselves. I mean, like if your doctor, you said, I want a chaperone, your doctor said, you don't trust me? I'm offended. Well, sorry, but don't be offended. It's just a normal check and balance to have in place. And if you're a law-abiding person, you should have no issue with that. And the person who flags it is the person you should be afraid of. So that's why we have these things in Judaism. We don't want to live in a society where no one can be trusted to lock the door with someone else in the room, but that's the reality of the world we live in, both in terms of the temptations that a person may fall prey to, but also what others will say, right? If you make sure that you're, whatever business you're in, whether you're a teacher or a rabbi or a therapist or a doctor or a solicitor, I don't know, whatever, an accountant or some kind of anyone that sees clients, if you make sure that you always do so in such a way that nobody could ever accuse you of anything inappropriate, then you're never going to have a problem, right? Whether that's having CCTV or having the door open or having someone else, whatever it is. So we do these things because we recognize this. I think first we recognize human temptation, that we're all tempted in different ways. And secondly, we want to be v'yisem nakiyim. It says you should be clean. Your hands should be clean, right? It doesn't even say innocent. It says clean, squeaky clean. It's a very important principle, both before God and before mankind. So let's just see a few other examples of this. People who are very ethical people who have the highest standards. Who'd like to read this one? It's two slides. Yeah.
The Gemara family were expert in preparing the showbread. It was said of them that their memory was held in high esteem because fine bread was never found in their children's homes. In case people might say they feed from the preparation of the showbread.
If you recall, the showbread was the fancy bread that was all stacked up and was, so it says they didn't make, so in other words, at home, they could have made their own bread, but they didn't make bread that looked anything like it so that people wouldn't say, oh, look at them, they've been pinching it, right? I don't know, it'd be almost like any example you care to think of, someone working for an organization to say, here, have a free WhatsApp. You say, no, I don't want to, because it might be perceived as, I don't know, let's say you gave the kashrut supervision to I don't know, a deli, right? And you walk in and they say, today we're giving the first 100 customers a free piece of kugel. And you say, that's very nice. But as I'm the supervising rabbi, I don't want to have any appearance of impropriety, and someone might just see you give me free food and think you're bribing me, so I insist on paying for it. Something like that, Let's see about another family, similar case. Now, by the way, is there anywhere in halakha that says that if your job is to prepare the breads for the temple, you can't have similar looking bread at home? Of course not, right? It's going beyond the letter of the law to go above any kind of suspicion whatsoever. Right, let's see another one here.
That's so sad. This is very sad. This is really sad that you have to feel this way.
Very.
But it's a recognition of human nature. People have to be beyond suspicion. So you're right. So I told you the story, I think, I went into primary school and I gave the example if I went into McDonald's or Chili's and someone took a picture of me and put it on social media, and one of the kids said, which I thought was brilliant, but that's a breach of your privacy. It's not right. I said, you're right, it's not right. But unfortunately, that's the world we live in. People do things like that. We live in you're right. You shouldn't judge. So if you're saying, what should I do if I see that the family that prepare the showbread have very similar looking bread in their house, I should think, obviously, they didn't steal it from the temple because they wouldn't do that. But
Exactly.
you have to be above suspicion that no one can even think for a moment. Right? So, it's not a bad policy to have, particularly if you're a religious person that people look up to. It's not a bad policy to have. Even though there might be a perfectly innocent explanation, you say, nonetheless, people won't understand, so therefore I'm not going to ... So you might say, it could be I'm actually 100% allowed to do this, but because people won't understand, then I'm not going to ... right? Many years ago, probably told the story before, I was in Golders Green. I don't remember where I was or what I was doing, but I needed to use the facilities. And there used to be a McDonald's there. I don't know if it's still there. Went into McDonald's to use the bathroom. And I got locked in there for about half an hour. I took this as a sign that you shouldn't do that. I was once on a bus to Rhode Island from New York. We got to the end of the line, and we'd been on the bus for like 4 hours. There was a toilet on the bus. It was out of order. I said to the bus driver, can I just, no, maybe it wasn't out of order. Maybe he was telling us we had to get off or something. I said, can I just use the bathroom? He says, the one in at McDonald's over there. I said, well, I can't go in there. It's not kosher. He said, we don't have to eat anything. You just have to go in there. So, by the way, in America, a lot of service stations are kind of built around the restaurant. So it's not like here where you have a restaurant and then you have a services. It'll be basically a McDonald's or a Burger King with toilets in it and maybe, you know, a small shop. So I don't know what the position is on these things. You know, most people would assume if you see someone with a yarmulke that it's not kosher, they're going to the bathroom. But, you know, there's three scenarios. One is they assume that you're in there because, you know, you need to go to the bathroom, or I don't know, you need help, you need to call, you know, you need to use the phone, I don't know, whatever. Right. The second scenario is you're in there because it's kosher, and therefore people assume it's kosher because you're sitting there eating, because you're sitting there. And the third worst scenario is they assume that you're eating treif.
Yeah.
There is a famous story of two rabbis, I don't remember where it was, that went to a certain restaurant that was looking into getting kosher supervision and had a meeting. I think the Ray may have offered them a cold drink, a Coke or something. So somebody saw these two rabbis sitting in the window in this restaurant with the owner and therefore assumed it was kosher, right? So, which is a silly thing to assume, but, you know, this is the reality.
So saving the jealous or suspicious person from their own failings.
Yeah, look, you shouldn't be judgy, you shouldn't be suspicious, you should always judge people favorably. At the same time, we live in a society where that won't, and also, by the way, that's open to abuse as well, right? Because the predator can say, well, you have to judge me favorably, you've got no evidence, right? You know, if somebody comes to you and says, I've got a great investment opportunity, and you say, how do I know it's a good opportunity? They say, don't you trust me? I go to the same shul as you, you know, I eat strictly kosher, I'm a frum guy. That's fine, do your due diligence still.
And people can exaggerate.
Right, and also, by the way, that's a big...
You could come out of McDonald's,
Yes.
if you've been to the toilet.
I don't know if...
and say, oh, I saw him eating a beef burger.
Yes, yes. Yes. By the way, the last thing I raised, Mordechai's not on today. I don't know if it happens in his community. There's a massive problem, probably in all minority communities, but in the Jewish community, particularly the Frum community, of word of mouth and trust, right? So you could have, you know, unfortunately, this is how predators have succeeded, because somebody's babysat for one person and they've said, oh, he's such a nice guy. Yeah. And before you know it, they've got testimonials and whatever. And meanwhile, they're actually dodgy. Or investments. Someone says to his friend, oh, you've got the best investment, you know, it's amazing, put all your wedding money in, you know, and whatever. And say, how can I trust him? What do you mean? He's my third cousin twice removed. He's so frum, he only eats meat that he killed himself. And, you know, right? And actually it's got nothing to do with the actual, and first of all, it may be a Ponzi scheme. Or secondly, they may be an honest person, but they're just a terrible investor. So, you know, right? You know, you wouldn't go to a doctor because someone said he's very frum, he dabbles with extra kavana. You'd make sure he's the best doctor. You know what I mean? So, yeah. So, yes, we shouldn't judge. Yes, we should judge favorably if we have to. Yes, we should give people the benefit of the doubt. At the same time, we live in a world where people judge, and therefore we shouldn't do things that are open to suspicion. And also, there's something in Judaism called a there's something called a cheskas kashrus, which is a presumption of innocence, a presumption of kosherness. So, for example, right, it's problematic in the communities we live in because we know there are people that don't only eat in kosher restaurants. But if, for example, you were in, I don't know, maybe Alei Tzion. I don't know if everyone in Alei Tzion is Shomer Shabbat, Shomer Kashrut, but it's generally seen as a religious community. Or you're in a community on some of the yeshuvim in Israel, they have, you know, you can't just go live in their community. They have admissions criteria, some of them. I don't know how that works legally, but you have to have a certain standard of observance. So in such a scenario, it may well be the case that in that community, you know, if you make a bar mitzvah or something, they'll say you can bring in your homemade cakes and whatever, because everyone in the community keeps the same level of kashrut. And you know, we don't cast aspersions on people, right? If Yankel and Beryl one day are seen in the non-kosher McDonald's, then the Rav might have to say, I don't think we can trust your kashrut at home anymore. But until that's the case, there is a presumption of trust, right? Just by the way, someone walks into shul, and we have 9 men, and a stranger walks into shul, right? We don't actually say to them, prove you're Jewish. Yes? if you're a mikveh lady and someone comes from a mikveh appointment, you don't ask them to produce their ketubah, right? There are many times that we give someone a presumption of, we presume that they are bona fide, right? If someone wants to get married under chuppah, and by marrying them, you're going to join these two people halachically, and they have to commit, and to the exclusion of everyone else, you want to make sure they're eligible to get married. But to simply count on the minyan, or to someone to use the mikveh, or we trust people's all the time on their kashrut. Said it's different in the type of community we're in. Particularly, a lot of rabbis have a policy not to eat out to avoid causing offense. But there is a presumption, there is a trust, inherent trust. We believe in people's inherent goodness, right? Just by the way, we also believe in temptation. So, for example, if I decide to start a little business making sugared almonds, the correct thing to do, halachically, even though I don't know how hard they are to make, and everyone knows me and trusts me, the correct thing to do would be to have some kind of kosher supervision, preferably somebody outside of my own circle. Because at the end of the day, once you're selling something, there's always going to be a temptation to cut corners, right? And it's not, I'm going to say, let's put some pig fat in it. But, there might be something, I don't know, maybe, one of the ingredients is not 100%, but it's not the end of the world, and it was only a little bit, and so on. And before you know it, I'm going to be justifying myself. So the idea of kashrut supervision isn't only for people who are not religious, it's actually for religious people as well, because as soon as you're selling a product, right, there's a temptation to cut corners. So it's kind of, you're right, and he's right as well, right? Should we judge people? No, we should give everyone the benefit of the doubt and assume that everyone's strictly kosher and in every sense of the word, right? And ethical and moral and upstanding. At the same time, should I give anyone any cause to ever suspect that I might be anything but that? No, I shouldn't. So is it proper to have boundaries and frameworks and protections in place? 100%. The Torah is full of those. So that's why these people were given so much respect. Here's another family. Let's read about the Avtenas family. Jeff, do you want to carry on? I think you were reading.
Okay. Likewise, the Avtenas family was skilled in making the incense used in the temple. They too were held in high regard, because never did a bride of their family go forth perfumed, and when they married a woman from elsewhere, they stipulated that she was not to go out perfumed, in case people should say they perfumed themselves with the preparation of the temple incense.
Right, everyone follow that? So the incense was
That's horrible. That's really is. I don't like that at all.
But is that not human nature? Is that not human nature?
That's their problem. That's their problem. If they think that they've taken it from the temple, that's their problem. If you can
surely they could have used another type of perfume.
A different smell.
Of course they
Something with
could.
a different perfume.
Of course they could.
Smell.
So you see the lengths that people go to, that people shouldn't think that there's any kind of impropriety. So people are horrified that there are such suspicious people in this world. It's going to get worse, by the way. People even suspected Moshe. We'll see in a minute. So the Yerushalmi doesn't agree with you, or maybe it does agree with you, but it says this is a very important principle. Well, okay. These are specific cases where you might say you disagree, but presumably we all agree with the premise that it's a sad fact that we live in a very judgmental world, but at the same time, we have to always be above suspicion. So I'll give you a simple example. I'll give you a simple
thinking. All you're doing is thinking about.
Simple example, right? If you're the guy that empties the tzedakah boxes in the base medrash, you shouldn't do it on your own. Make sure there's someone else there. You count the money together. You make sure it's all accounted for, right? So you turn around and say, "Oh, you don't trust me." It's not we don't trust you, but there could be someone somewhere who's tempted. So rather than put temptation in someone's way, we will all have a system where we have checks and balances, right? Why does someone need to check your figures? It's not that we think you're a liar or a fraudster, right? You could always say it's, what a terrible world we live in. I can't teach a bar mitzvah boy in his home without his parents' home because people think I can't keep my hands to myself. You know what? That's the world we live in. I'll live with that in order to make sure that children are safe. I'll live with the fact that I need 2 signatories on something in order to make sure that there's never theft. I'll live with this fact that, it's slightly absurd to say that because my family were involved in, whatever, something that was donated, and we can have it with a charity, right? Let's say, you know, somebody, I don't know, let's say, I don't know, let's say I'm the chief executive of the United Synagogue. And there's a big story about how, you know, I don't know, Sainsbury's have just donated, you know, thousands of cans of Coke to US Chesed to help all the refugees, right? And it's been a big story everywhere. And let's say I'm the head of US Chesed, and I'm, you know, I'm making a kiddush or something. And I say to myself, you know what? Let's not put any Coke cans out, just in case anyone thinks that we snaffled them from the donation, right? That's ridiculous. But it's not a bad idea to be thinking that way, to be squeaky clean, right? It's sad that we live in such a world, but we do. We do.
As I said before, you're saving people from their own failings.
Right. The other important point is, we've learned in the Tanya Shir, we don't believe people are inherently evil. We do believe that temptation is very strong, right? So it's not fair to put a person, if I actually ask the Gabbai to go and empty the tzedakah boxes with no oversight, right? And let's say that day, his electric is about to get cut off because he can't pay the bill. And he thinks to himself, there's £100 in here, I'll take it, I'll put it back next week. I have no intention of keeping it. No one's going to know, and this way I'll save face. You know, it doesn't have to be someone who's an outright thief. It could be something like that, where a person justifies it. Right? There's so many scenarios. Person thinks, I'll just do this, I'll just do that. So we want to avoid putting temptation in front of people as well. It's an important principle. It's human nature. Okay, it's a very basic human instinct. Greed, call it what you like. Wanting to have what you don't have. It's a difficult one. We shouldn't. So coming back to the point about the babysitters, I don't think it's entirely fair to say to somebody, oh, you trust this person to be a nanny to your children, but you wouldn't leave your jewelry lying around. I think the answer to that is you don't leave your jewelry lying around because, you know, a person who would never think of stealing something might see your jewelry and think, you know, they deserve to have that taken because they've been careless with it. Or again, they might be very desperate. Who knows the situation? So it's not that they woke up this morning, you know, I don't know, in the scenario above where someone's emptying the tzedakah boxes, they didn't wake up in the morning and think, I'll steal some tzedakah money today, right? The opportunity presented itself, right? And it happens time and again. People fall. We all fall. We're all human. We're all tempted, right? Like I said, it might not be theft outright. It might be that you think, oh, I'm going to return it next week. I'm just so desperate and no one will mind, right? Or I'll get round to telling my boss and you didn't tell them. So we want to avoid any of that. If that means we have to be a little bit, you know, neurotic and possibly extreme and people say, oh, you've got no trust, better that than people should suspect. So I hear all of your concerns about these cases, but they're held up as examples of very high ethical behavior. Is it that different from someone saying, I don't shake hands with women that's not my wife, and someone saying, well, what, you think you can't control yourself? They're saying, no, just have a very, very high threshold of the boundary that I put in place. Anyway, let's see what the Talmud says in the Yerushalmi about this, because it actually gives sources from the Torah and the prophets and the writings. Who'd like to read?
I'll read.
Go on.
R. Samuel bar Nachum said in the name of Rabbi Jonathan, in the Mosaic books, the prophets and the writings, we find that a person must discharge his obligation before men, just as he must discharge them before Hashem. Where in the Mosaic books, in the verse, you shall be innocent in the eyes of Hashem and Israel. Where in the prophets, in Hashem, the Lord Hashem, he knows Israel, he knows, and Israel too shall know.
I'm not sure where that's from, sorry, but that's a quote from Nach somewhere where it says that Israel should also know, right? Yeah.
Right. Where in the writings, in the verse, you shall find grace and good favor in the eyes of Hashem and men. Gamliel Zoga asked Rabbi Yossi bar Avram, which verse says it most clearly? He replied, you shall be innocent in the eyes of Hashem and Israel.
Okay, so I think the point here is, person might say, well, God knows the truth, right? So the guy emptying the tzedakah box says, well, God knows I'm doing nothing wrong. Okay, but it says you should be clean before Israel as well. So it's important that you have the veneer of respectability as well, right? By the way, that also has a problem. Sometimes people have veneer of respectability and they do things behind the scenes. It's also not good. So from this, we get basically a couple of principles. So there are things that themselves might arouse suspicion that we should be careful about doing. So just an interesting halacha, right, on this note. In the old days, you're supposed to light Hanukkah candles in your window, yeah? Right. What happens if your house is on a corner of two streets? Do you put them in the front window or the back window?
Both.
So the halacha says
put
both,
them
so
in-
people won't think you're not lighting Hanukkah candles.
Yeah, you put
Okay.
them in both, don't you?
Yeah, right? Interesting, huh? And then there's Maris Ayin, so things that give the appearance of being wrong, right? So it said cheeseburgers and things like that, right? The classic example of Maris Ayin that's given is that if you're out in the rain and you come home, you shouldn't put your clothes to dry on the rack on Shabbos because people will think you've done your laundry, which is forbidden, right? It's really interesting, this, because as far as I know, when you hear these stories about like rural Germany and places where they used to have like Christian laws for Sunday, one of the classic ones was not hanging your washing out on a Sunday. So it's interesting. That's the archetypal example of Maris Ayin. Now you might say, I know I didn't do my laundry. God knows I didn't do my laundry. What does it matter? So it's this idea of being completely squeaky clean. Or worse, people will assume it's okay. So you might say, which I think you did, surely, as long as Hashem knows the truth, who cares what human beings think? I can spend my whole life worrying about what other people think. They should learn to be less judgmental and judge favorably and leave me alone. So, question. In day-to-day life, which do you think is more relevant to most people? Their peers and what they think about them, or what Hashem thinks about them?
What Hashem thinks about.
Really?
I think most people will probably think more in terms of their peers.
Right. I'm sure I told the story before. I have a friend called Chase Taub, who's become quite a big speaker these days. And he always tells the story. He was in a Walmart car park, and there was a lady, I don't think she was Jewish, in a minivan, and she had a few kids with her, and she was screaming at the kids, like really going at it, like she was about to harm them or something. And then she saw that he was watching, and she suddenly calmed down. Now, what happened there? Was she faking it? No, she was genuinely angry. Once she realized someone was watching her, she calmed down because she didn't want someone watching her behave a certain way, right? I think most people's human nature is we perhaps, even if we believe in God, we sort of forget sometimes the idea that Hashem is watching us. But we don't forget that other human beings are watching us. That's why people do things in private when no one will see them, right? We have a very important, very interesting case here. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and what he said to his students on his deathbed. So here we go. Who'd like to read? I think back to you, Iris, actually.
Okay. His students said to him, our teacher, bless us. He said, our teacher, bless us. He said to them, may it be his will that the fear of heaven shall be upon you, like the fear of flesh and blood. His students were puzzled and said, to that point and not beyond, shouldn't one fear God more? He said to them, would that a person achieve that level of fear? Know that when one commits a transgression, he says to himself, I hope that no man will see me. If one is as concerned about avoiding shame before God as he is before man, he will never sin.
Right. So this is a famous thing. He said, may God's fear be upon you. May the fear of heaven be upon you the same way you're fearful of flesh and blood. So it's like, what? What kind of bracha is that? So it says, because the same way that you're very self-conscious about what other people are doing, or how other people see you. Yeah, exactly. Right? Now, wait a minute. The same rabbi said that if you suspect someone who's innocent of something, then you'll be punished with afflictions by God. You should always judge a person favorably. So 1 second, if people should be judging favorably and not suspecting us, why is it our problems? The answer is we shouldn't rely on others' charity in this matter. Yes, right, coming back to primary school kids, yes, it's a breach of my privacy if someone takes a picture of me and McDonald's on Shabbos, but I shouldn't go into McDonald's on Shabbos. So you don't rely on other people's charity. Moshe Rabbeinu, no less, had this problem. I don't know what this is, a Rashi somewhere. Anyone come across this? This is quite horrible, really. If you think it's horrible what they were saying about the people with the perfume, look what they said about Moshe. Who'd like to read this one?
If
I
Moshe
will.
went, if Moshe went forth early from his tent, they say, why does the son of Abraham leave so early? Perhaps he is at home. If he left late, they said, what do you think? He is sitting and devising evil schemes against you and is plotting against you.
Right, poor man, right? Reminds me of the joke about three guys sitting in a Russian prison, right? One says, what are you in for? He says, my watch was early, so I was, watch was fast. I was accused of, fomenting revolution against the regime. I said, the second one, what happened to you? He says, my watch was slow. I was accused of, being, what do you call it? Sabotage. And they say to the third one, what's with you? He says, my watch was on time. I was accused of smuggling foreign watches. Yeah. So, so this poor man, right? Unless he leaves bang on time, right? If he leaves early, then must be, he's had a row with his wife. So, and if he leaves late, it must be that maybe he's just working hard. Yeah. So this is Moshe Rabbeinu. He gave his whole life to looking out for us. Yet people are so quick to point the finger. Right. So Rabbi Moshe Sofer, I think it was the son of the Chassam Sofer. No, I think that is the Chassam Sofer, sorry. Said that this actually troubled Moshe throughout his life. How can you be innocent in the eyes of God and Israel? It's easy to be innocent in the eyes of God, but in the eyes of Israel, it's very, very difficult. And we say at every Levaya and every Shiva, there's non-righteous on earth who does only good and never sins. Yeah? So maybe that's what it means. That no matter how righteous you are, you're always going to do something wrong in the eyes of the people. So what's the answer? So the answer is that we have to be role models and we have to be above suspicion. At the same time, we shouldn't suspect others, certainly not. We have to be role models, we have to be above suspicion. So now let's come back to the Parsha, right? So Bnei Reuven and Bnei Gad and half of Manasseh said, we want to settle on the land east of the Jordan. Moshe says that's fine, on condition that you do your bit first. And actually, years later, Joshua reminds them about their promise in the book of Joshua, and because they carried through on it, something else happened. Let's just see. Who'd like to read this? Number 11. It's very peculiar. Yes.
I can read. I'm sorry, I came in late. That is why we said, let us get ready and build an altar, but not for burnt offerings or sacrifices. On the contrary, it is to be a witness between us and you and the generations that follow, that we will worship the Lord at the sanctuary with our burnt offerings, sacrifices, and fellowship offerings. Then in the future, your descendants will not be able to say to yours, to ours. I've lost it.
You have no share.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't see it. To say to ours in the future. Yes, thank you. To say to ours, you have no share in the Lord. And we said, if they ever say this to us or to our descendants, we will answer, look at the replica of the Lord's altar, which our fathers built, not for burnt offerings and sacrifices, but as a witness between us and you.
Right. So just to clarify, the 2.5 tribes later on, right? So ironically, they did their bit as far as the wall was concerned. They honored their agreement with Moshe. But they then said, let's build an altar, not an altar for offerings, but just basically as a sort of testament to our loyalty, that we'll build a monument, basically be like the altar. And actually what happened was they were actually accused of trying to basically build their own temple in their territory. And if you look in the book of Joshua, there's basically nearly a civil war over this, even though their intentions are very good. So ironically, although the first issue, which was they're going to war, was averted because, they did join in the war and they were seen as part of the people. Later on, there was a problem, right? They had the best of intentions, Like, we're going to build this monument, but people misunderstood, and that caused a big row in the book of Joshua. Now, again, but surely you should trust people. Obviously, they're not building idol worship. They just wanted to make a nice monument, to build a nice replica. Yeah, but unfortunately, this comes back to the same point, that people have a nature of being suspicious. So you could say, gosh, it never ends, does it? It's easy to be innocent before God because he knows the truth, but to be innocent in human eyes is almost impossible. How is it ever going to be possible? So the answer is, that's the challenge. It's the challenge to be role models and exemplars and embodiments of Torah. It's not easy. It's a big, big challenge. Let's see what Rabbi Sachs says. Here we go. Who'd like to read Rabbi Sachs? Julian, you're always good at this.
Okay. Being innocent before God is one thing. Being innocent before one's fellow human beings is another, and far more difficult. Yet that is the challenge. Not because we seek their approval, that is what is known as pandering, but because we are summoned to be role models, exemplars, living embodiments of Torah, and because we are called on to be a unifying, not a divisive presence in Jewish life. As the Mattos Masei said, we will not always succeed. Despite our best endeavors, others may still accuse us, as they accused Moses, of things of which we are utterly innocent. Yet we must do our best by being charitable in our judgment of others and scrupulous in the way we conduct ourselves.
Right. So it's, on the one hand, we should be charitable in the way we judge others. On the other hand, we shouldn't give anyone any reason to judge us negatively. It sounds like it's a lifelong process. It's not easy. It's clearly not easy. But that's not a reason to give up, basically. So it's challenging, right? It's the sort of thing, whereas people have said throughout this year, it's not right. The world is that way. You're right. It's not good. It's not ideal, but it's reality. Is it ideal that we have to have so many safeguards in place for everything nowadays? Both religiously and secularly, particularly interactions with children or interactions with vulnerable people or people of the same or opposite gender. Does it make sense that we live in a society where people really are so weak? Well, yes and no. That's human nature since time immemorial. So make sure that you put safeguards in place, like you would with anything else. You put safeguards. Do those safeguards mean that lots of innocent people, their life gets difficult? Quite possibly, yes. But it's the price you pay. That's it. That's the fact. It was interesting. I don't know what to talk. Sorry?
It all still goes on. It still all goes on. You will do these safeguards.
Of course it does. You can never truly protect. I mean, I don't want to see the story of Wimbledon with these protesters. People queued for 4 hours to go through metal detectors. They still managed to bring in, well, confetti, I guess, isn't metal. I don't know exactly what happened there. But, it's... No, that wasn't confetti. What did they bring to Wimbledon? Jigsaw pieces. Jigsaw pieces.
They bought it in the shop there, and so the shop had to stop selling it.
So, what are you going to do? Stop selling jigsaw puzzles? It's all about terrorism. The solution to terrorism is not to constantly prevent terror attacks. It's to try to educate people at the source. But in the meantime, yeah.
I think Beryl was trying to say something.
Sorry, Beryl.
I'm just saying that they bought these jigsaw puzzles in the shop. So the shop banned jigsaw puzzles. They bought it on the premises once they were in. Right.
But so the solution will be they'll ban jigsaw puzzles and then they'll find something else. For years you had to take your shoes off because of the shoe bomber. But people will find some other way.
What did they do with the jigsaw puzzle pieces?
They threw them at the pitch.
Oh.
Pitch, what do you call it? Tennis.
Court.
Yeah. The court. Court. Thank you, court. Yes.
And then the match took ages because the players were trying to complete the jigsaw.
Put them together.
Yes.
And they lost a piece.
Were they?
I have personally feel, people have very stressful lives, and any of these things that affect people's everyday life, if you've spent all that money to go to Wimbledon, it's a chutzpah to disrupt it. It's a chutzpah to disrupt train travel on days when people are going to be on holiday with their kids. It causes misery. I know that's why they do it, but all these things, I don't know, shows so much disregard for other people. It really gets on my nerves, I must say. But there you go. Anyway, right, my wife said we've been finishing earlier, so it's nearly 11 o'clock today, so we needed a full hour. So well done, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right,
Thank
nice
you.
to see you,
Bye.
Barbara.
Thank you.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
when are you thinking of breaking up for the summer?
When's the August bank holiday?
End of
The end
August.
End of August.
So probably,
The 28th of August.
right, we'll probably take off the 21st and the 28th. Not have those 2
No,
weeks.
I think you'll find it's the 31st of August.
No,
Well,
it's
according to the calendar, it's the 28th.
yes, the 28th.
Oh, is
Debbie,
it
it's a Monday.
28th? Okay.
Right, okay. So, so yeah, for now, next few weeks, we're definitely on. Unless everyone's away 1 week or something, I guess we'll play it by ear.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Hope to see everybody Friday night.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
I won't be there, I'm afraid. I should be probably eating something
You'll be in the bar.
in Bath.
You'll-
Probably
yes, of
having
course.
salad.
We're going to Rome.
Okay.
Rome, oh, that's
Okay, you'll
lovely.
be having pizza and pasta.
Right,
Enjoy
Mind
it.
you might see some Roman baths there as well.
Yes,
right.
Roman baths.
We're booked
good.
into a restaurant on Friday night,
Yeah.
aren't we?
Very nice.
Lucky
Please
you.
It's
Okay.
lovely. You'll have a
So-
wonderful time, Pam.
So the phrase "when in Rome" makes sense as far as things like minhag, that you should do the local custom. But I don't know, because sometimes "when in Rome" is kind of an argument for, like, I was away over Shabbos, but I wasn't near a shul, so I didn't have to. I went to the football instead, or whatever. I'm sure you wouldn't.
We're not going to the football in Rome.
No. So or
I
the
won't be going to
the Colosseum, or
football
whatever. Yeah.
But in
Julian's
Rome,
booked in.
don't do as the Romeos do.
And we have a lovely time, Pam and
We've
Julian.
booked in with the shul.
Yeah.
Actually,
Have a lov-
to get
Yeah.
into the shul there, you have to send your passports.
We had
Oh,
to
they
do
have-
that in Barcelona.
They have
Oh,
armed
wow.
guards. It's very, very.
Last time we
well,
went to Rome, we just
Yeah.
walked into the shul.
I went to Leon a few years just before
Lovely pizza place round.
and I didn't have to. I just went into the shul there, and nobody questioned it.
No,
We had to do that in Barcelona. We had to give them our details.
yes,
Right.
yes. There was a lovely kosher pizza place just round the corner.
Yeah, just by the shore. Yeah.
Yes, really nice. Yeah.
Not the one you told us about, Debbie.
Yeah, where they do, Sue Godfrey told me they do artichokes, fried artichokes. It's absolutely
yeah.
amazing.
I'm not
Don't
I've
know
even
never
whether they
had
still
an
do it,
artichoke.
It's really nice.
but
I've never had an artichoke. What does it taste like?
I don't know. Will you dip it in like a vinaigrette?
Oh,
No,
It's like
so that apparently the Italian ones, they deep fry them and you eat the whole thing.
Exactly. You pull out leaf by leaf.
No, you eat the whole thing, including where it comes out of.
Oh, wow.
oh, really?
It's a long
So I'm
time since
told.
we were in
Is
Rome.
it, is it just the middle bit?
No,
that's
no,
deep?
it's what my sister was saying.
Yeah, I
We'll let you know.
Let us know. Bring us back one.
No.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
Okay, enjoy.
I understand you're not
Lovely.
going tomorrow, Pam.
Pardon?
You're not going tomorrow night.
No, hopefully, trying to get the ticket
No,
change
I-
over to Michael.
No, I said Michael can go. Because we're going to Oxford on the Oxford trip on Wednesday, and it's
Oh,
And
you're
I've got
busy,
to
busy
pack.
this week.
Yeah.
we're always busy.
When I see you tonight, it's
Yeah, please God, I'm going to the class.
yes, I'll be there as well.
yeah, lovely. See you tonight.
Look forward to it.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you,
Okay.
Rabbi.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good
Bye.
week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a nice trip.
Thank you.
Thank you.